don't drop it, but I am in a fun, weird mood. Cenk Uygur, John Iadarola with you guys. I'm all the way over here. Hey guys, how you doing?
That's a big gap, isn't it?
It is a bit of a big gap. Okay, anyways, surprising news out of today's show in a couple of different parts, not even just one. It might be up to 3, but I didn't count. It's all the way up to 3 is hard. I might be defending Donald Trump. Huh. That interesting.
So in this hour?
I think some in this hour, some in the second hour.
Unacceptable.
Well,
unacceptable.
All right,
I'm going to be the cop who stops it.
Well, you might literally be. Because you're not a cop, but so he's trying to figure out which story I'm going to support him. All right, so we'll get to all that. That'll be fun. We are going to wade back in a little bit into the Aziz Ansari story. Mm-hmm. That's in the second hour with Anna. And we do have a fun conspiracy theory that has been born. It was born yesterday. We'll tell you about it. This time it's from the left, and even though it's a conspiracy theory, you might enjoy it. Okay, so all that being said, let's do it. We got great news to start the show.
It might also be true. Anyway, okay, I'm not gonna be in that one so I can make jokes now. Okay, last night Wisconsin held a special election for State Senate District 10. And you should know that, at least historically for the past couple of decades, this has been a pretty red district. So in the 2016 presidential election, Trump beat Hillary Clinton 55 to 38 in the district. That's a resounding win right there. Mitt Romney won the district in 2012 despite losing statewide against President Barack Obama. He won by 6 points. So even though Wisconsin went blue, that district stayed red, and it became redder with Donald Trump. And so, you know, this is like the sort of state senate election that you just, whatever, you're not gonna cover it because obviously they're gonna keep it. Except it's not so obvious because they didn't. Democrat Patty Schachtner defeated Republican Adam Jarchow, flipping control of a seat that has been held by Republicans since 2000. So yes, she won despite the fact that no Democrat has held the seat for nearly 2 decades at this point. This makes, by the way, the 34th flipped seat in the Trump era.
All right, so obviously we're gonna do 2 things. One is,
ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Jarchow. Down goes Jarchow.
He said it couldn't be done.
I don't know who Jarchow is. Jar Jar. I mean, no.
Jar Jar.
Jar Jar, bye-bye. So anyway, Jarchow's gone. Of course, he's a local state Senate hopeful. Of course, you don't know him and I don't know him. Kidding aside, I do have one fun thing from the soundboard. Okay, so let me explain why the celebration. So, number one, I did the math. Trump had won by 17 points. She won, the Democrat in this case, won by 9 points. So that is a 26-point swing. 26-point swing. Now, we've had a lot of special elections since Trump got into office, and there's been a lot of wild swings like this. Near Tulsa, Oklahoma, there was a district that Trump had won by over 30 points, and a 26-year-old lesbian mom, progressive, very progressive, won that district. And so that was an even larger swing, right? So, but we're starting to lose track of the enormity of it. 26-point swings are not a little bit, they're not medium-sized, they're colossal. That is an enormous swing. Now, as John pointed out, second reason, and related obviously, is 34 seats have swung. That's an awful lot of seats when we haven't had a lot of elections since Trump won. These are just special elections, local, state races, etc. So 34 seats is a hell of a lot of seats under that context. So some felt that it wasn't that big a deal because a couple of the congressional races like in Kansas and Montana and Georgia went to the Republicans, so they thought they were okay. But those were, a lot of them were deeply red districts, and that was when Trump had just begun. So now we've had a lot more of Trump, and apparently people want a lot less of him. Final point that's really important, why this local state race is actually super relevant to the entire nation, is that it's in a rural area. And now in the reddest places, in the most rural areas, Democrats are starting to win. And if that trend continues nationwide in 2018, tsunami ain't the half of it, man. Right now, the Republican Party beginning to realize what's going on, but of course Trump doesn't. The water is receding, and they're like, "Oh, cool, the water's going out." No, that's right before the tsunami hits right on top of your head. Okay, get out of the beach. Okay, so this kind of swing is really, I think, is now beginning to be indicative. And I didn't say that in the beginning, but that Oklahoma race that I referred to, I think that was a tipping point. And here we are past the tipping point. Republicans are in a world of hurt.
Yeah, I think at one point, John Oliver made a chart of all of the swings from Trump in that district to the special election result. And it was, I mean, 26 is good, but there were quite a few that were above 26, and we can't guarantee that that's going to continue. And on a larger point, I'm gonna stand in for Jared Jackson from earlier today. Don't get relaxed. We need to not only win all these elections, and a lot can happen in 7, 9, 10 months, a long time. But we also need to make sure that we're winning them with the right people, and that's why the upcoming rounds of primaries is so important. I think that Donald Trump being the figurative and legislative and executive head of the Republican Party means that basically people will take anything to stop him, but we can't settle for anything. We need the right candidates too. So I agree, I think that there probably is gonna be some sort of a tsunami, but do not for 1 second stop until we are weeks past the tsunami.
Yeah, so let me double down on that. And so the part of the reason that this phenomenon is happening is not what you would normally suspect, and not what a lot of media is talking about. It's not like Republicans got up one day in the reddest area of Wisconsin and went like, you know what, golly gee, I think I like the liberals more now, and they went out and voted for them. Now, that happens to some degree, but the bigger phenomenon is progressives, Democrats are energized, and they show up to vote. And Republicans are enervated, and so they think, oh, what am I gonna go vote in these elections for? And since they're dispirited, that voter turnout is the lion's share of the reason why you're having these huge swings. So if you relax and you stay at home during election day, well, then that defeats the whole point, and you won't have these results.
Totally.
And so, but it goes to a second point that's really important, and we'll have a test case of it relatively soon, which is that if you give people a reason to get excited, that is why a lot of the very progressive candidates are winning in even bigger margins, because people go, oh, that person's gonna fight for me. So they show up to vote in a special election when not a lot of people do, right? If you put out a weak sauce candidate, I would argue the one in Georgia was in the congressional election, that says, oh, gentility, be gentle, be polite, civil to Republicans. Then people don't show up to vote as much, and then you lose. So the test case is Pennsylvania 18th. There's a special election coming up there because Tim Murphy resigned in disgrace. He had gotten an abortion for his mistress when he claimed to be pro-life. I love saying that. Okay, so I just interviewed Bob Solomon, who's from that district, who's gonna run next time around in the general election coming up in November, and he's a progressive. And what did the Democratic Party do? They took a weak sauce guy who's like benign and doesn't want to talk about policies and is trying to be Republican light, and they're running him in that district because it is a heavily Republican district in Pennsylvania.
Let's test it.
Yeah, what's that?
Let's test it.
Exactly, so I think, my guess, if I'm right, and that's why I like to say things ahead of time, so it's not Monday morning quarterback, is that guy probably won't win. But that's not a bold statement. Like I said, it's a heavily Republican district, and it is a congressional race. You'll have more voter turnout, so Democrat probably won't win. But let's look at the margin in that race. And if it turns out that it's not as close as the other races, that'll give you some indication. Don't run weak sauce. You're not getting Republicans to switch over. You're either getting Democrats to show up to vote or they're not, and that's what's making the difference.
Yeah, and if you're feeling energized, I mean, there are you can go online and you can find calendars have been put together of all of the national special elections that are going on at the local level, at the state level, and all that. So you can get invested in those. A lot of them are probably happening in your area. But elections are not the be-all, end-all of politics. There's a lot going on every single day across the country. I see video of some awesome Dreamer defense protests and marches and stuff that are going on. This Saturday is the Women's March. I'll be at the LA. Like there's a lot of that sort of thing going on as well. Elections obviously very important, and you have to show up then. But there's a lot of other stuff going on as well.
And one last thing here, or a couple of last things. So Scott Walker now in a panic. He's up for re-election next week. You got the tweets?
Yeah, you want to read them?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we've got Scott Walker saying Senate District 10 special election win by Democrat is a wake-up call for Republicans in Wisconsin. So that's probably the smartest thing he's ever said. And then he said, wake-up call, can't presume that voters know we are getting positive things done in Wisconsin. Help us share the good news.
I like that the second tweet sounds more panicked. He capitalized wake up call and put it in the meeting. He's like, no, seriously, wake up. And he says, share the good news. Look, we would say similar things about, hey, share our ideas with folks. But with the Republicans, the way they share good news, the good news is I got tax cuts for the rich. Okay, now do you want to share that widely? Nah, not really. So what they mean is, hey, Koch brothers, send money. We're in a lot of trouble. So that we can share the good news for the middle class, right? So they're gonna buy a lot of ads, they're gonna do a lot of propaganda. But in this election, the Republicans way outspent the Democrat and they still lost. That's why Scott Walker's in a bigger panic. He's like, wait, if I can't buy my way to a victory, how the hell would I win? Exactly. That's why 30 Republicans have already retired in Congress. They see and understand what a lot of people on TV and certainly in Washington are not getting, the people in the establishment are not getting, which is that poll numbers are real. They're not fake news. When Trump's in the low 30s and the Republican approval is this low, you know what happens? You lose, and not only close elections, but what you previously thought were unlosable elections. That's why guys like Darrell Issa are running as fast as they can. As my ex-Jamaican girlfriend used to say, who I want, stay, stay, stay. Who I want, run, 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 run. And they are gone. So nothing but good news, at least for today.
Want to take our first break?
Sure. And then when we come back at some point, a little bit of a defense of Trump. And
we'll see about that.
And Bannon went to the House and spoke to them about Trump. What did he say? Drew Robs when we return. I know what you're thinking.
I love how you do something with your lips when you play the sound clips.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Look at his lips.
I was a woman.
No, you're closing your mouth. Usually I'll be like, and I'm like, is he like lip syncing it?
I don't know. I never noticed it until you said it.
It's a funny habit.
It's not human intelligence!
TYT member.
They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.
Been easy for me. I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. All my life, I was told no.
You said I had small hands. They're not small. I never heard that one before.
That's $300 million. That's a pretty good number. Pretty good number. We were doing a press release on it, and I got all worked up. And I said, okay, well, that's the size of the U.S. population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion. Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
No, that's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking, one day.
People looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks crosses 6 billion views. They said you couldn't do it, you can't change the media, don't try. Well, here we are, we're changing the media. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, John Iadarola with you guys. Yossarian writes in, Cenk looks stoned as fuck. What? That is obviously not true, right? Okay, Kara says, it's a new conspiracy theory.
That you're just stoned all the time.
Yeah, the stoner theory. Kara says, love when Cenk's in a mood, LOL. Captain Jinglepants says, electing Trump was a special election. That ain't right.
Come on.
That ain't right, Captain Jinglepants, okay?
No t-shirt.
And get a look at a load of this. Early member shout out. David Martodam and Joyce Sherman. And I normally do the member shout outs a little bit later in the program, but thank you guys, tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. We got old school tonight. It's gonna be awesome. Aggressive Progressive is gonna be tomorrow. We've got the post game today. Yesterday we had a terrific post game about my trip to Northern California. Coyotes on the hunt, burnt down neighborhoods. The most amazing bets of all time. Man, membership has its privileges. I'm not saying anything except for the fact that it's tytnetwork.com/join. Okay, John Iadarola, what's next?
Nothing. Inside jokes are next. Anyway, okay, let's jump back on the news. The newly independent Steve Bannon went before the House Intelligence Committee yesterday to answer questions about what he knows in regards to the Russia investigation, but he ended up revealing very little, at least about that investigation. But what he did reveal is the lengths the White House will go to stop him from revealing whatever it is that he might know. So we do have some information about what's going to happen in the future, but we're also interested in why it is that he revealed as little as he did on yesterday's testimony before that House committee. So we're going to start off with Trey Gowdy talking about his personal frustrations with Steve Bannon's unwillingness to answer any questions.
We spent the first half of the day trying to understand what in the world he was talking about with executive privilege. His version of executive privilege is it covers the transition, it covers the time he was at the White House, and it covers time in memoriam. That is no one's definition of executive privilege. So we spent several hours trying to figure out just what the heck he was talking about. And then in the afternoon, we had to dodge around these three categories that are apparently off limits. Now, Bill, keep in mind, this is the same person who accused two of the president's family members of committing treasonous acts. So, of course, we're going to want to cross-examine him on what he thinks was treasonous. But if everything's off limits, that's a really short conversation.
All right, guys, we're going to talk about the substance in a second, but I just want to congratulate Trey Gowdy for joining a boy band. I think that's awfully brave of him this late in his career. And Trey, remember, if you find anyone in the woods, don't tape it, okay? That'll get you in trouble. Is he trying to look like Logan Paul?
These are a lot of hair references that I sort of get. Yeah, the hair was interesting. Maybe he ran to make that interview, I don't know.
Yes.
I've had hair troubles of my own.
Okay, now, putting aside nonsense, Trey Gowdy on the right side of an issue. When's the last time that happened? He's generally right. These are ridiculous excuses. The thing that I'm most concerned about is that you've got the president getting the questions in real time. So it's not just that Bannon's not answering the questions. His lawyer is then feeding those questions back to the White House so they could prepare for the next witnesses and know what's being asked. And I think that's deeply problematic. And look, giving Gowdy more credit here, and literally the first time I've ever done that, it's not just that he's mad at Bannon, that's a layup, that's easy in Republican circles today. But he's mad at the White House and he's calling out Trump for not letting Bannon answer the questions. And that does take a little bit of political courage.
Exactly, yeah. So let's break down this because there's a couple things happening here. I mean, first of all, Bannon was largely asserting that some vague, ever-present executive privilege was stopping communications about a lot of stuff, but especially when it comes to the timing of what questions he can answer. We're gonna get into that in just a little bit, but I'm gonna jump ahead one graphic because as Cenk was saying, the AP reported that Bannon's attorney, Bill Burke, relayed the questions in real time to the White House, who then instructed again in real time Bannon to not answer any questions about things that happened both during the presidential transition in late 2016 or about his time within the White House. So basically, you could theoretically answer questions, except those that have to do that fall under the area of executive privilege, only about things that happened during the campaign, not the transition and not after the transition, even though we know that those are incredibly important time periods that of course they're going to look into. Now what's interesting is that Bill Burke, serving as Bannon's attorney in this case, is also representing Don McGahn, one of the lead White House attorneys. And so it might be that this is a way to preemptively protect one of his other clients who could also be called in to answer questions at some point. This was described by Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, as effectively a gag order by the White House because of how broad the protections they were asserting would be. Now, what's interesting is that we also find out, if we could jump back to graphic 5, that Steve Bannon has struck a deal with Robert Mueller's team. We had previewed earlier this week that he would be going before Robert Mueller's investigation, not just the House Intelligence Committee, but also the special counsel. But we find out now that he has got a deal to be interviewed by prosecutors instead of testifying before the actual grand jury, according to someone with information about the process.
So I was a little frustrated that none of the reporters clarified whether it was under oath or not. If he's testifying in front of the grand jury, clearly under oath, and then he would be held responsible for that if he were to lie during that testimony. To prosecutors, I assume it is, but I'm not positive, and that might be why they struck that deal. So maybe that it's not under oath, but he does have to be forthright with the prosecutors, otherwise they could then bring him to a grand jury and take other actions against him. But that's really good news. So he answered basically no relevant questions to the House. But the fact that the special counsel is going to get to have him not be able to use executive privilege and answer questions as forthright as Steve Bannon can be, Although from time to time, as we saw in Michael Wolff's book, he can be pretty forthright.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that winds up in any kind of fruitful information for the special counsel.
Yeah. Although we do have to acknowledge, as we have before, that while Steve Bannon obviously very close with Donald Trump, and so it's possible that by his proximity for quite a while that he would have picked up something. Even from all of the information revealed in Fire and Fury, I don't know of any particular reason why Steve Bannon would know about these particular issues. He knows a lot about where the bodies are buried and all of that, the interplay of the different factions in the White House. But I mean, he preemptively in Fire and Fury even says, I have insulated myself from the Russia stuff. So it's possible that he doesn't have any information.
Right, and certainly he seems to be indicating that and will go through great lengths to indicate that. And this might be funny, but I kind of believe him because Bannon, for all of his heinous actions and beliefs, is one of the rare people who was actually intelligent in the Trump White House. So there were some folks that are, Gary Cohn used to run Goldman Sachs. You could agree or disagree with the guy, but he's very, very bright. Bannon is bright. So the minute he sees Russian shenanigans, he's like, I don't want any piece of that. So, and that was his claim in those frank conversations to Michael Wolff. But think about what else that means. That means he knew that there were funny things going on about Russia, and he's like, I don't want any piece of that because that looks like trouble. It looks like you're doing the wrong thing. So even people inside the campaign and inside the White House could see that clear as day. Although apparently some right-wingers and some left-wingers can't. Okay, and one last thing. White House official weirdly bragging to reporters that they told Bannon, quote, hey, pump the brakes. I don't think that's a thing you should be bragging about, that hey, we got one of the witnesses to obstruct justice in front of the House Intelligence Committee.
Yeah, and just a reminder, generally when you communicate in real time to someone testifying before Congress to tell them, oh, don't say anything more, usually it's because you're innocent of everything. That's what I find. But anyway, I do want to play one more Trey Gowdy clip though. I hope that this is the one, he talks about sort of a quote coming from Steve Bannon that is in Fire and Fury about sort of the stakes of what Steve Bannon has previously revealed that I think is pretty interesting.
He answered it initially, and then apparently his lawyer didn't like the fact that he answered it, so then he clammed up. That is an eminently reasonable, legitimate question. If you're going to accuse somebody of a crime for which you can be put to death, what is your evidence for that? So I don't know anyone who wouldn't ask that question. He started to answer it, and then his lawyers got involved, and that usually messes up almost everything, and that's why we were there for a long time yesterday, but we're going to have to go back tomorrow.
So that's a reference to his assertion that what Jared Kushner and Manafort and Donald Trump Jr. had gotten up to in Trump Tower was treasonous, which I haven't often heard put by anyone on any side, let alone Trey Gowdy, as something potentially punishable by death. So I just like to imagine that Donald Trump Jr. is at home eating cereal and he perks up when he hears that.
And remember, this actually is bipartisan, shifts to Democrat. Gowdy is a Republican. Gowdy's the one that led the Benghazi investigations. So him being concerned about treason in the Trump White House, noteworthy.
Yeah, well, he wants Bannon to talk. We'll see how concerned he is about the actual issues, but he certainly wants Bannon. He wants to exercise his power, that's true. Okay, let's turn to something very different. In the very near future, the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency is going to be conducting a fairly massive sweeping roundup of undocumented immigrants in the Northern California area. The campaign is going to be centered in around San Francisco and could happen within weeks. And it's expected to become the biggest enforcement action of its kind under President Trump. In fact, they are saying in various news outlets that they are expecting to target at least 1,500 different undocumented immigrants, although that is very much the lowest possible limit, as we'll get into. So the operation is said to go after people who have been identified as targets for deportation, including those who have been served with final deportation orders and those with criminal histories. Now, going back just a little bit earlier, Acting ICE Director Thomas Homan said that the federal government would not allow California to be a, quote, sanctuary state for illegal aliens, and would have no choice but to conduct at-large arrests in local neighborhoods and at work sites, which will inevitably, and this is where it gets a little bit scary, result in additional collateral arrests instead of focusing on arrests at jails and prisons where transfers are safer for ICE officers and the community, and naturally much more targeted there. So they say they're targeting 1,500 undocumented immigrants, although they're going into the process expecting that that is likely to then spiderweb off into a number of other arrests, possibly for each one of those 1,500 cases.
Okay, these right-wingers can't help themselves. They're like, well, we can't do collateral damage inside the United States. That's a shame. So let's do collateral arrests. What's a collateral arrest? Like you're just mulling it? In fact, we actually had some. We do know what it is. During the Trump inauguration, some people had broken windows and the police rounded up 200 people in the area, including journalists and legal defense folks who had come to help the protesters, random protesters. They rounded them all up. Collateral arrests. I'm pretty sure we're not supposed to do collateral arrests in America because you happen to be in the wrong area at the wrong time. So I know what their excuse will be. No, we round up everybody that looked Latino. I mean, we suspected of being undocumented immigrants. Really, how do you suspect them of that? I mean, the guys that you have issues with, for example, if they're criminals, they have a criminal record. Look, that the local authorities will help you with anyway. That's not part of the law. The sanctuary law is not, okay, we'll hide the criminals away from the federal government because we love having criminals in California. No, it is not related to that, right? So if you go into, as they say, communities here, and you're targeting the people you've got on your list, okay. How do you do collateral arrest? Based on what? Do you ask them for papers?
Round up people.
I don't carry papers around. You carry papers around?
I carry all of my papers at all times.
Yeah, and by the way, they're coming to California, right? So do you think they're gonna round up John in one of these collateral arrests?
I hope not. I was bluffing about the papers, by the way. I don't actually know where they are.
My guess is they're not going to collaterally arrest John.
Yeah.
But if you're Latino, watch out. The feds are coming. And they're kind of thrilled about it. This guy seems like he's very excited about doing false arrests.
And we've got a little bit more from him, but understand that this is now a very wide version of something that we saw. I mean, it certainly wasn't the first time, but very high profile case earlier this week of a gentleman who had been here for I think 30 years, being rounded up and deported. Well, now let's do 1,500 at once. And it definitely seems like there is some geographic bias going on here because although there are sanctuary cities or things similar legally to sanctuary cities in various parts of the country, they seem particularly interested in California in this case. So we have this planned sweep. We also have earlier this month, Homan told Fox News that, quote, California better hold on tight. He said that if local politicians don't want to protect their communities, then ICE will. Although I think a lot of people, including local politicians, want to protect their communities from ICE in California. And this is not going to be the first time. In September, 27 people were arrested in Santa Clara County as part of an operation targeting sanctuary cities across the country that led to 500 arrests. In June, federal officers arrested 54 people in Central California. And in the same way that we know the tax bill was focused on trying to aid largely red states, although we'll get into some of the ways that that won't actually work, and harm blue states, it's entirely possible that when it comes to enforcing other sorts of laws, we could also see this sort of bias in the future.
So in cities and states that have sanctuary laws, crime actually goes down. And so that seems, especially the right wingers, perhaps counterintuitive. Well, I thought ICE was here to protect our communities. So why does crime go down when they do sanctuary laws? For a number of reasons, but the most important one is the reason that they say, hey, you don't have to worry about your papers when you talk to the cops or go to the hospital is because they want you to talk to the cops and go to the hospital. So in terms of public health, you don't want someone not bringing in their kids with a broken arm or God forbid worse because they're worried about their papers and then the kid dies from internal bleeding. Don't do that, right? If you're humane and you're a decent person, you don't want that to happen. And in the case of the cops, they need to be able to help solve cases. They need to talk to the community. If a woman is abused at home or someone is mugged or raped or a loved one is killed, they want them to be able to talk to the cops so they can solve the crimes and prevent more crimes. And if they're worried about talking to the cops because they don't have papers and they know the cops will ask for papers, well then they won't talk to the cops. And what happens? Crime goes up. You know that is logical. And beyond the logic, we now have the numbers and the data to back that up. So when ICE comes in here, they get to act like tough guys, Be like, oh yeah, we're coming to get the bad guys and do collateral arrests, and we're gonna mess people up, and you better buckle up, ha ha. But in reality, you're making California less safe in everywhere you go. And as usual with these knuckleheads, they don't really care about that. That's not their objective. Their objective is to appear tough for political reasons.
And certainly these sorts of raids will be broadcast all over Fox News as, look, this is getting tough. This is how you protect people. It works both in a state level, but then also nationally convinces people that this White House has their best interest at heart, when of course we know that they're not doing the actual things we would need to do to defend ourselves. If you're in California, what is really more threatening to you? The possibility that some of these undocumented immigrants will go about their lives as they have for decades, or the possibility that some sort of thermonuclear war will break out with North Korea? Well, okay, they're doing very different things in the one area than in the other.
Yeah, and finally, the other reason for sanctuary laws is because the federal government doesn't pay to detain these people. So when California arrests someone who is an undocumented immigrant for a crime, they keep them in prison because they've committed a crime. But if they arrest someone and find out that they're not documented, the federal government says, now hold them, and potentially up to years of holding that person until us in our due time get to him and then take him to into federal hands. Like, one, that's not due process. You might be holding a guy in prison who turns out to be innocent for a long, long time. Second of all, there is no underlying crime. It's just that he's undocumented. Third of all, you didn't pay for that. That's an unfunded mandate that conservatives are supposed to hate. So if you want to have me hold all these people just because they're undocumented, well, at a bare minimum, you got to pay the resources to be able to do that. And the federal government goes, nah, I don't want to do that. So then, okay, then of course people aren't going to cooperate with you for logical reasons. The people of California have already decided we don't want our taxpayer money and our cops and our prisons held up for non-dangerous situations. We want them to address murder, rape, and all the important crimes and not be filled up taking my money to hold people who are undocumented in prison for years and years.
Yeah.
Okay, are we?
Second break time?
Second break time.
Still a few more stories to get to. What time we have left?
Yeah, I still haven't gotten to the Trump defense. I wonder where it's coming. Huh, interesting. And what percentage of Republicans know that fake news isn't fake, but don't care anyway? We'll do that when we come back. I have decided that I'm going to get ripped. Okay.
What?
Okay.
Like physically?
Yeah. Okay. What? You don't believe me?
I 100% don't believe you.
I will get so ripped, here's my prediction, that someone at TYT will say, Cenk, you've got to stop working out.
We're tired of you winning.
So you don't believe me?
Cenk, you don't have time to like do your daily duties for the main show.
Duties. You don't even have time for your daily duties. Because what you guys don't know is how great my muscles already are.
It's absolutely possible, but you can't have Leah run to the food truck to get you like 2 different types of grilled cheeses with like tater tots for lunch. Like you can't have that anymore.
Let's see what happens.
You also have to go to the gym regularly.
Let's see what happens. All I'm saying is, let's see what happens. Have I ever been wrong about a prediction? Almost never.
I just shot a clip. It's time sensitive and it needs to be edited right now.
Did anybody call for an editor?
Need this in an hour.
But you're an editor too.
Fuck you.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Let me read a couple tweets. Kelly Kerr writes in, I look forward to a time when Steve Bannon is no longer relevant and we don't have to talk about him or see his face. And as I said yesterday, I think we should boycott his book if he writes one. Well, that's going to be the easiest boycott in the world. Okay, no, not buying it. Literally. Dr. Chaos MD writes in, after so many Benghazi hearings that produce nothing, Gowdy is probably desperate to have a hearing that results in any kind of win. And Enrique Rodriguez writes in, the very fact that Bannon was looking for plausible deniability back then is in and of itself an indicator that shenanigans of the highest order were going on.
I love shenanigans.
Or shenanigans, as the kids would say.
As the kid and a Kasparian would say. Not a kid, I guess.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Okay, by the way, Rebel headquarters tonight. We have old school, but we also have Rebel headquarters. There is where we talk about progressive events and candidates. We've got an event that I want to tell you about in New York that's coming up that for voting rights. But by popular demand, Daniel Biss, running for governor in Illinois, super progressive. He's kind of lit people on fire in the progressive world. And so come find out what everybody's talking about. We'll have him on Rebel headquarters tonight at 8:05 p.m. Eastern. All right, what's next, John?
You're gonna get all up in his business?
Yeah.
Use that, that's good.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, okay, let's jump back into it. There was a time not too long ago when the term fake news had an actual definition that people seemed to agree on that made a lot of sense. And that has since been completely destroyed, leaving us to wonder, what does that term now actually mean day to day to various groups of Americans? And we have a survey from Knight Gallup that gets into that and finds the dueling interpretations of what that term means, which we're gonna turn to in just a second. But first of all, how important is this area of concern for Americans? Well, 73% of Americans say the spread of inaccurate information on the internet is a major problem with news coverage today, more than any other potential type of news bias, of which there are many. I'm not 100% sure that that should actually be the largest one. I think that corporate consolidation and control of the media might be a bigger one, but it's not obviously a big one and people care about it. Additionally, just 50% of the Americans surveyed feel confident people can cut through bias to sort out the facts in the news, down from 66% a generation ago. And that's sort of what they feel generally, but apparently less than 1 out of 3 feel that they are actually equipped on a day-to-day basis to sort out inaccurate from accurate news, which is a huge concern. And so now let's talk about fake news, which, if you weren't around, originally had a very simple, easy to understand explanation. It was news that was designed to look like real news, but was purposefully deceptive and false, intending to sort of hide in the cloak of news to convince people of things that are not true. And it became very large a couple of years ago online because of the proliferation of websites that had the idea of news but not actually the content. Well, 42% of Republicans consider accurate news stories that cast a politician or political group in a negative light to always be defined as fake news. And for comparison, 17% of Democrats agree. Now understand, that doesn't mean that they think news that they don't believe is true but turns out to be true is still always fake news. It's news that they, in their response, say is true. But if it makes a politician look bad, it should always be considered fake news. That's 42% of Republicans.
That's 42% of Republicans saying, I don't give a damn about the truth. Never cared about it, don't care about it now. In fact, not only it's not that I'm indifferent to it, I will actively call it fake even though I know it's real. Man, that is the power of propaganda and brainwashing. So those guys, I will now call it fake news even though I know it is true. And by the way, as we often talk about, studies have shown that liberals and conservatives both have a confirmation bias and have several other biases. So you see 17% of Democrats there as well, and that is shameful. We should actually, progressives should actually care about the truth. And we shouldn't try to fit the facts around our opinions. We should try to fit our opinions around the facts. Now, having said that, as usual, don't give me that both sides do it stuff when it's 17 to 42. That's a giant, giant difference. Republicans do it a lot more.
Yeah, now thankfully that isn't everybody. I mean, even for Republicans, it's 42%. So what about the actual definition? People knowingly portraying false information as true information. Well, between 40 and 50% of both Democrats and Republicans think that should be labeled as fake news. So are they not merciful? Half the country largely still has their head on right, but almost half of the other side just doesn't care. As you describe, it just does not matter to them anymore. And what are you gonna say?
Yeah, just one quick note about the numbers. You know, I said 42% of Republicans don't care if it's true; they're going to call it fake anyway. 17% Democrats. But you know, I realized halfway through as you were explaining it, John, the Republicans will then turn around and go, 42 is a higher number than 17. Fake news. Well, but that's it's clearly. Oh, I know it's true. Fake news.
Well, it's true, but it makes me feel bad.
Right,
fake news.
You know what? Fake math.
Fake numbers, fake numbers. You know what? 239, that's a fake number, look it up. Anyway, and then you have the sort of larger area, because obviously a lot of this is due to Donald Trump, not just him. Other Republicans have sort of tried to do the same thing about everything is fake news that makes him look bad. But there's things that sort of are tied in with that. So Trump often will talk about fake sources, phony sources. The idea being that if he doesn't know exactly who it is that leaked something, it is by its very definition false, which is of course not true. And we know that all of the people surrounding him were competing with each other to leak as much information as possible. But a lot of people who don't know that will then hear the president over the course of a year and then think, well, in the future, if I don't know the source for something, it's probably fake, which is of course not the actual, that's not the case. Real journalists who use multiple sources can't necessarily put those people on the record, but if the information is verified with other people, then it is still reliable information in most cases. But people are going to lose faith in that as well.
So two things here. One, there's a great article about where a lot of the leaks from the White House were coming from. And so Trump would go around and be super frustrated. He's like, I don't know where the source is, so it's fake news, right? Turns out it was Trump, and he wasn't calling the papers. He was going around calling all of his buddies that he plays golf with, etc. And those guys leak like a sieve. So he'd be like, "Oh yeah," then I called him, a poop hole, right? And then they'd go tell the press, and then he'd be like, "Where are the sources from? Where are the sources from? It's fake. It's from you knucklehead."
The sources are coming from inside the moron.
Okay, and then finally, look guys, I just feel like I need to clarify this one more time. Fake news is, it's made up, that's where it originated from. It's a website you go to and the website has completely incorrect information on purpose to try to deceive you. It's not trying to be news. Then there's bias, which you can argue exists in a lot of different places, including, yes, definitely in the mainstream media, and I would argue that. You remember the Washington Post did the 16 headlines against Bernie Sanders in 16 hours. And it was unbelievable that, God, they hate Bernie Sanders. Now, in that case, they don't know they hate Bernie Sanders. There was no conspiracy. They didn't get together in a room and be like, all right, let's bury the guy, right? Let's bury him. Now,
well,
some of you might think,
didn't.
Yeah, some of you might think that they did, but that is not really how it works. I've been there. It's just, they truly believed that he had no chance of winning. They truly believed that he was a dangerous communist, right? Like these insane thoughts. And so but it colored their view of Sanders so much that they became like Trump supporters, the press did. And you would show them polls of Sanders doing 12 points better than Hillary Clinton against Republicans, whether it was Cruz or Trump or a generic Republican, and they go, no, I don't believe those numbers. I don't believe those numbers. Bernie can't win.
Fake news.
And even after the election, when I was talking about 2020, and I talked, it was off the record, so I'm not going to say who or what publication, but a major publication, and the well-known reporter like almost screamed, Bernie will never be president. And that was only a little while after they had said that they don't do opinion. So there, of course, bias exists in the news, but the Washington Post, the New York Times, etc., are not going out there and writing fake stories that are not attached to the truth. And then finally, there's perspective journalism as well, and but that's at least honest about their perspective. I think that's what we do here. Once Fox News dropped their BS fair and balanced slogan, to some degree, Hannity's honest about what he does. He might lie in the content, but he says, I'm a conservative and this is my perspective, right? So those are the different kinds of news. So not everything you disagree with is fake news.
Yeah. And of course, even in the case of the Washington Post, understand that there is a distinction between the editorial side of something like the Washington Post and the news side, which are totally different things with totally different staffs, often in different parts of the building. So understand that as well. Just one other thing I wanted to say about this, and this actually makes me kind of sad because I came up as blogs were getting big and podcasts were getting big, things like the Young Turks were getting big, and there were so many new ways to get information. And if you engage in that and if you're smart about it, and you go to different sorts of sources, you can learn so much and much more than you could have in decades past. But unfortunately, not just from fake news, but things like fake news, it's actually having the opposite effect on a lot of people. 58% of Americans say the increased number of news sources today makes it harder to be informed, which is a tragedy. Like, we have so much access to information now, but people feel like it's actually making it more difficult to understand what's going on. That just underscores for me how much we need to deal with this problem. Anyway, why don't we jump into another story? We're running a little bit low on time. Something very different. The Republican tax bill was a massive multi-trillion-dollar giveaway to corporations and the 1%. But in the wake of its passage, a lot of corporations, including things like Comcast and Walmart and AT&T, put out these big press releases about bonuses that they're giving to their workers, supposedly totally because of the tax bill. Doesn't matter if they'd been negotiating with the union for a year for these things. Doesn't matter if the factories they were announcing had actually been announced months before. It was so because of the tax bill. They wanted you to believe. And one of the reasons they did that, all that PR, was because while they're giving out these $1,000 bonuses, in many cases, as we've broken down over the past few weeks, they were also cutting thousands of jobs, or they were limiting wage increases for their workers and things of that sort. And often with the fine print, the bonuses weren't what they appeared to be anyway. They would say 100,000 workers getting $1,000 bonuses, up to $1,000 if you'd been working for us for 20 years. So for the vast majority of people, they wouldn't be getting anything like that. But it all sounded good, and we've done what we can to fight back against that narrative. But now let's find out if it's actually working, at least in a test case. Fox News went to a cafe to find out what actual voters think about these bonuses being given out by corporations in comparison to the huge amounts of money the corporations are getting. Here's what they found out.
Nancy Pelosi said that breadcrumbs are what these $1,000 bonuses are. What does a $1,000 bonus mean to real people?
Well, for one thing, it's a very, very big deal. You know, when you've worked for a company and they want to give you $1,000 just because our president gave us a tax break, to me, it's a big deal. We've been called deplorables and everything else, but this deplorable appreciates those breadcrumbs.
Very much. You also had something to say about respect of this president.
He didn't say anything about deplorables. I feel like they told her to say something like that because nothing about deplorables actually came up there. And so she said it's a big deal, which if you actually got $1,000 would be a big deal. Of course, if Walmart is then gonna cut your job, not as big of a deal. And also not because of the tax cut President Trump gave us. In many cases, these are the bonuses they get at the end of every year. Or again, unions have been negotiating it for a year. But at least for some voters, none of that matters. The message has gone through as intended.
Well, look, in some ways I understand what she's saying. $1,000 is a big deal to a lot of workers. And so if she got a $1,000 check and she's happy about it, great, that makes sense. Now, it's a little bit like what Republicans have been charging Democrats with all these years, where they say, oh, they just hand out goodies to be able to get their voters to vote for them.
Yeah.
Kind of like a $1,000 check. They accuse Obama of handing out Obama phones. They say, oh yeah, they're just giving away money to these people who don't want to work. And even in things like the earned income tax credit, where you literally have to work in order to receive it. So now when they give away goodies like Santa Claus, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, well, I like those breadcrumbs. They're yummy for my tummy. So that's part of it. But the other thing is, to be fair to her and unfair to Trump and the Republicans and Fox News.
I like it so far.
she didn't necessarily hear the story of all the Sam's Clubs that closed. So she didn't get fired. Other people at Walmart got fired. At the same time, they closed down a lot of stores. Thousands of people lost their jobs. But since she didn't lose her job and she got a check, She thinks, yeah, I like that. I'm gonna vote for them again. Now, again, and she doesn't know the context that most of those companies, Walmart, AT&T, et cetera, doing those checks, at most, it is 10% of only 1 year of their tax cuts. They're keeping the other 90%, and then the rest of the years, they're keeping 100%. So without that context, because she doesn't watch the Young Turks, you could understand why she had the reaction that she did.
If you know her, please link her to one of our videos because we're not against her. Like if these bonuses were what they seem to be, that would be awesome. We were exactly the people who'd be pushing for that and far more, which I'll get into, but it's not. She is being deceived, unfortunately. We broke down for a number of these different companies. Their bonus packages amounted to something like 0.027% of their revenue for a year, even though they're gonna be making billions off these tax cuts, and the execs at those companies will be making, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars every single year from these tax cuts. So they are just breadcrumbs because they're intended to deceive you, to send you off a path where you never realize that huge quantities of money are being given to the people with all the real political and economic power in this country. And I mentioned something about this like a week ago, that tiny bit of money for regular workers, tons of money for the rich. And some conservative woman tweeted to me, man, you're just so mad that they're getting this $1,000, aren't you? I love your tears, or something like that. And I didn't respond to her because she seemed kind of stupid. But if I had, I would have said, no, I'm not against the $1,000. Here's what I want. Let's see if you actually are in the corner for these people, like the people in that cafe. I don't want $1,000. I want a livable goddamn wage for her. I want consistent raises that keep up with or exceed cost of living increases. I want her insurance to not skyrocket because 13 million people are gonna be thrown off their insurance plans because of that tax bill. I want experiments in basic income. I want her to get free access to health insurance. I want her kids to get free access to schooling and things like that. I want actual economic power to be put back in the pockets of the people who are doing the real work in America. I don't want one time, maybe $1,000 if you've been working there for 20 years. I want real substantive change to the entire goddamn economic system we have. Do you support that? No, you want breadcrumbs.
Preach it, brother. Teach it. I didn't know I was on with Pastor John today. Okay, and I like how the Republicans have outdone Marie Antoinette here. Oh, they don't have bread. Well, then give them breadcrumbs.
It's bread and circuses. The bread is the $1,000 for some Walmart employees. The circuses, ICE raids and feuds with North Korea and other entertaining BS like that. And they're hoping that you will be so distracted by those sorts of things that you don't understand what is actually ongoing in this country.
All right, let's do one more story.
Okay, let's do one more story. I'm not mentally prepared.
Everything's gonna be okay.
Okay. Late last week, news broke that Donald Trump's lawyers allegedly paid off a former adult film star $130,000 so that she would not go public with an affair that she had engaged in with Donald Trump. And by going public, we mean going public in the weeks leading up to the election. They apparently paid that huge amount of money and she didn't come out with the story. So that was the first that most people heard of this entire thing. But not everybody, actually. Some people had heard about it earlier. Some people, in fact, had heard about it before the actual election. So what I'm talking about is Fox News. One of the network's reporters, Diana Falzone, had filed a story in October of 2016 about an alleged sexual relationship between Clifford, that's the actual name of Stormy Daniels, the adult film star that we're talking about. People familiar with the matter said. Now, Falzone had an on-the-record statement from Clifford's manager at the time, Gina Rodriguez, confirming that her client had engaged in a sexual relationship with Trump, 3 of these people said. And Falzone had even seen emails about a settlement, the settlement that we're talking about here. So according to the sources that know, she had the story and Fox killed it. So that information could have come out. It was revealed before the actual election, but Fox News said, you know what? We've got other stuff that we want to cover in the run up to this election. And so they actually killed it. Now, understand, for full disclosure, Stormy Daniels says that this entire thing is not true, that the allegations about the being paid off are not true, that the sexual relationship is not true and never actually happened. But she is undercut by a couple of different sources. First and foremost, herself. In a new issue of In Touch magazine on newsstands today, Stormy confirmed in her own words that she had sex with Donald Trump in his Lake Tahoe, Nevada hotel suite in 2006. That was originally what she said to the magazine back in 2011, which was supported by multiple other people, including her friend and ex-husband. And at the time, she took and passed a polygraph about that information. Also, Alana Evans, a friend of hers, said that at the time that she was having this encounter, she had received a phone call saying, come and hang out with us, come have fun, let's party. So full disclosure, she says now that it didn't happen after the alleged payment, which she also says didn't happen, but back in 2011, she said that it did.
So here is my partial defense of Donald Trump. And up until the very last article I read, and I needlessly read a lot about this, I was going to do a full defense of him, but at the end, they did come up with real reasons why this story is a little bit relevant. But my defense of Trump is one, I don't care that he had an affair. Like some people are like, well, that shows that he had an affair. And I mean, here's a guy who's had, and besides which you don't know that Donald Trump's had affairs. You don't realize that.
He seemed like kind of a nice guy, respectful of women. What's the problem?
Of course, he's had affairs. Okay. Then the second thing they said that it proves is, there's all these allegations from women about sexual assault, harassment, etc. This proves that he is willing to lie about sex. Of course.
Seems like a straightforward guy.
Right.
Trustworthy.
Yeah. First of all, I got news for you. A lot of guys are willing to lie about sex, including Bill Clinton. And second of all, Donald Trump lies about everything. He lies about the weather, right? There isn't anything he won't lie about. If that's a revelation to you, you're being wildly disingenuous, or you're not that bright.
Agreed.
And then she goes in the 2011 interview with In Touch. She describes how the sex with Trump was. Don't do that. I don't care. I don't want to know how sex with Trump is, or Obama, or Chuck Schumer.
To be fair, she only slept with Trump, as far as we know.
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer is in the clear.
And look, if you want to give it context, that's fair. In that, if we heard a story about how Obama had sex with a porn star and then paid her $130,000 to cover it up, that would have been by far the largest scandal in Obama's 8 years, and the Republicans would have lost their minds. Oh my God, I can't believe, disgrace the office, right? Now, but we're progressives. We don't care about your private sex life.
Agreed.
That's between you and that person. So why is it in any way relevant? One is that in the same tournament that Stormy Daniels met, let's acknowledge, by the way, that that's a fun name, met Donald Trump and slept with him in 2006, another adult film actor, Jessica Drake, said that Trump had invited them up to her up to his hotel room, and she went with a couple of friends because she was a little afraid of Trump, and she was right. She said Trump just grabbed me and kissed me without asking for permission. And now this in some ways corroborates that. Same hotel room, same golf tournament, other adult film stars there. So okay, so that's relevant.
It gets into illegal behavior.
Yes, and then the only other way that it is relevant is they say, look, in the dossier, in the famous dossier, they say the Russians had information about Trump's sex life and that Trump wants to cover that up. Well, here's a story where he pays $130,000 to cover up a story about his sex life. That makes you go, okay, if he was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to cover it up in one instance, is it possible that he would do it in another? So it's a data point. It's not overwhelming. It's not an open and shut case. It's not like Mueller's gonna look at that and be like, we're done with this. Okay, guilty, right? But it is a data point that he is very concerned about covering up these sexual affairs, and that if the Russians had one on him that was far worse, what wouldn't he do to cover it up? It's an interesting question.
And that is the only reason that it is on the show, or especially in the first hour, is that what had been a hypothetical that he could be blackmailed for his personal sexual activity and that it could theoretically influence him later on is not a hypothetical. I mean, if you believe those sources, it is an established fact. He can and has been blackmailed for his sexual activity.
That's a great way of putting it. And finally, if you're wondering, well, is it really true? I mean, first of all, she gave an interview in 2011 saying it's true with corroborating witnesses and a polygraph.
Which I don't think is admissible in court.
Yeah, that's okay. It's definitely true. But second of all, you know that Stormy Daniels hasn't actually come out in public and said anything about this. Michael Cohen, the same lawyer alleged to have paid her off, said he has a letter from Stormy Daniels that she signed, and he sent to the press, and that's the letter that says, "Oh, it's definitely not true. I never slept with Trump," but in part of the letter it says, "Trust me, if I had slept with Trump," and I'm like, she didn't write it. So she might have signed it as part of some sort of payoff, but she didn't write that letter.
And can I just say one thing, because I understand that some of this, while we believe that there is a non-salacious reason to cover this, gets into sexual activity where, like the quotes about what he was like in bed, we don't care about that. But I want to be fair to him and cover the good stuff too. He did say something very sweet to her. He complimented her. He said to her, and this is what she said to In Touch magazine, "Trump said I was, quote, just like his daughter." Oh, that's nice. He loves his daughter. And he thinks that she's just like one of the people he loves the most in the world.
John, I hadn't seen that. I really wish you hadn't told me that.
I'm just trying to be fair. Anyway, yes, the personal stuff doesn't matter, but when it can be used to manipulate you and you have the power over life and death for tens of millions of people, that's where it becomes our concern, possibly.
Yes. All right, guys, we're out of time here. Back into the Aziz Ansari story a little bit. Have we received criticism for it? Sure. We'll address that a little bit. So did Ashley Banfield. We'll also address that a little bit. Some curious sources for that, for some of the criticism, and some legitimate sources as well. So we'll talk about that when we return. right, back on the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. All right, Jeff Horton says, fake news. I thought that was how you pronounced Fox News. Oh. Scott Remington says, Republican voters' mantra is the truth. We can't handle the truth. I'm amused. Old Turk says, now that Bernie has name recognition, what do you think his vote share will be against whoever the DNC puts up against him? I think he nearly runs the table as far as states go and gets 60% vote share. Agreed. I've said this to you a million times because I go to DC, I talk to other reporters, I talk to people who are in the news business. They are universal in their disdain, not just their disdain of Bernie, but their amusement that Bernie could possibly win. And you say to them, but like, guys, you're doing it again. You're ignoring obvious poll numbers. You ignored them in the Republican primaries when Trump was up, and you kept saying he's not up when he was up, right?
Yeah.
How did I call that he was going to win the Republican primary? Because I read a poll. It's not that fucking complicated.
It's weird. I mean, I've never experienced reporters and members of the establishment underestimating a potential presidential candidate before.
Yeah, never happened, right?
Never happened before.
Fake news.
Yeah.
And then with Bernie, he was, he's closing in on Hillary. They're like, what's the big deal? Closing a 60-point lead. I don't see where the big story is. What the fuck? And then on and on and on. And so they're doing it again. Bernie is the most popular politician in the country. I've told you all the different stats on it. They look at those poll numbers and go, yeah, but that's not what all my friends in Washington say. They all say Bernie has no chance. Good, good, good. You keep thinking that way, okay? Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. He's going to run the table. They have no idea what's going to hit him if Bernie runs. All right.
Speaking of Bernie, okay, I have a little announcement to make. Let's come to my one shot,
Yeah,
a little close up
Get that
action.
guy off the screen.
All right. On January 23rd, Bernie Sanders will be conducting a very important town hall on the issue of Medicare for All. Of course, that is a proposal that he has been pushing for because he wants to provide health care for all Americans, and he wants to hash out the details. And he will do so not only by answering your questions, which you can submit to the Young Turks, but also through a number of medical professionals who are also joining in and participating in this town hall. It will take place on January 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern time. You can check it out live at facebook.com/theyoungturks. We will be live streaming it. And I am super excited to announce that I will be hosting this town hall. So I will be running the show. Of course, I'm not going to be the one answering the questions, but I will make sure that we will stay on topic and answer the most important questions that you have on this proposal and how Medicare for All would work in the United States. Also, if you're interested in submitting a question, you can do so by going to tytsubmission@gmail.com. Send us a 1-minute YouTube video, no longer than 1 minute, with your question to that email address, tytsubmission@gmail.com.
Okay, substance with Bernie Sanders and Anna Kasparian. I think we're going to do a show called that.
That'd be fun, yeah.
How fun would it be if Bernie and Anna were doing a show? Anna, let me tell you something, okay? We got to fix Medicare for all. Okay.
He's so real. Like, it's amazing how real he is. Anyway.
Okay, by the way, we're very likely to have super fun news later in the week. And then after that, the next week, I'm going to tell you why you need to be in Los Angeles in the middle of February. Big event.
Fascinating. Okay. All right. Let's get to the news. Donald Trump has had his first medical exam as president, and the results indicate that he's extremely healthy. His cholesterol is a little high, but according to the doctor that analyzed his health, he is in good shape. Dr. Ronnie Jackson is the person who conducted these tests, and it not only incorporated a physical exam, but also a cognitive exam because of the fact that so many people have been questioning Trump's mental fitness for office. Now, according to the official medical record, Trump stands at 75 inches tall, or 6 feet 3 inches tall, and weighs 239 pounds, which indicates that he is overweight, but his BMI indicates that he is not considered obese. His doctor was quoted as saying, Trump has incredible genes, and if he had a healthier diet over the past 20 years, he might live to be 200. In fact, why don't we hear from his doctor. Again, this is the same doctor, by the way, who performed medical exams on Obama. So it doesn't appear that there is any type of partisan issue here, but I want you to hear from him yourselves, so take a look.
Can you explain to me how a guy who eats McDonald's and fried chicken and all those Diet Cokes and who never exercises is in as good a shape as you say he's in?
It's called genetics. I don't know. It's some people have just great genes. I told the president that if he had a healthier diet over the last 20 years, he might live to be 200 years old. I don't know. I mean, he has incredible genes. I just assume.
Okay, so he has incredible genes. Now, that was something that was covered by Cenk on yesterday's show, but there's a little twist. And the twist to the story is that these medical reports have now led to the so-called girther movement.
Awesome.
A play on the birther movement, obviously, which was something that Trump pushed for when he claimed that Obama wasn't born in the United States and needed to show everyone his birth certificate. Now, the girther movement, I believe, was coined by Chris Hayes. He tweeted about it. Has anyone coined girther for those who believe the president weighs more than his doctor reports? And then the conspiracy theories began. The comparisons between Trump and athletes, Trump and our former president, Barack Obama. Now, Barack Obama's height was 6'1", and this new medical report on Trump indicates he's 6'3", but if you look at pictures of them standing side by side, that doesn't appear to be the case.
Well, Ben Mankiewicz says pictures don't tell 1,000 words, they lie. So it could depend on the angle, etc. So I'm not a girther. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but I'm 160 pounds.
Are you really? No, you're not. Okay, hold on. Sorry, because my mind went. Never mind. I'm not gonna insult you. Go ahead.
Too late. So anyway, I'm largely going to defend Donald Trump on this because it's a pointless conspiracy. So what, right? Even if he's lying, and I don't know why the doctor would lie. The doctor is a super legit doctor. He's been the White House doctor since 2013. It's not important, it's not relevant. But that's the thing about conspiracy theories. The minute they start to look more and more plausible every minute. So then the people found out that on his driver's license, he's actually listed as 6'2". Now, I look at that and go, who cares? 6'3", 6'2", what's the big deal? But then hold on. Then I read a little bit more into it, and people are like, if he was 6'2" and 239 pounds,
drums,
he would go from being overweight categorically based on BMI to obese. Now, is there anyone in the country who would care about whether they're called obese or not more than Donald Trump, right? Yeah. So I'm like, wait a minute, that's a little plausible, right? And then yesterday when I covered the story and I showed that same clip, I noted like Ronnie Jackson is sweating his ass off up there, okay? He's like under the lights and he's like frazzled and he's like, no, it's true. He's 239 pounds. It's 30 out of 30 on the cognitive score. But so what? There's lights there. It doesn't mean anything. But you start to put it together, and then people go, huh?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the girther movement is funny, mostly because it's a play off of the birther movement.
Oh, it's definitely on name alone, it's taking off.
It's pretty funny. I don't really like nitpicking about like his weight. You know what I mean? It makes me uncomfortable. It also makes me uncomfortable when people speculate about his mental health. I will admit that his behavior seems erratic. He seems to do things that don't seem normal, say things that don't seem normal. But based on this, cognitive test that he was given, he shows no signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. The exact test that they gave him is known as the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. And it's a very simple test, but apparently it's very effective in determining whether or not an individual has dementia or Alzheimer's. Now, it detects 94% of people who do have dementia, and a score of 26 or lower indicates that you probably are developing dementia. Now, he received a score of 30, but what they do is they have you draw a cube, and then, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like they gave him a genius test. Like people are treating it as if like, that's smartest man in America. No, he doesn't have signs of dementia, which is a good thing. Good, I'm glad he doesn't. Now, there's more that I wanna get to, because Sanjay Gupta has immersed himself in the middle of this controversy because he believes that Trump does in fact have heart disease. Okay, so let's go to graphic 33. According to Gupta, he found that Trump's coronary calcium score was alarming, noting Jackson's data that shows in 2009 it was 34 and in 2018 it's 133. Any score above 100 is at high risk of a heart attack or heart disease within 3 to 5 years. Look, I'm not a medical professional, I don't know, right? But I just feel uncomfortable with someone who's not like testing Trump himself chiming in on this either. You know what I mean?
Look, I'm gonna defend Trump on that one too. First of all, damn it, Jim, I'm not a doctor, I'm a talk show host. And so of course I don't know what a score of 133 means. I read it, I understood what Sanjay Gupta is saying, but it seems sensationalistic to call it heart disease. It makes it sound like he's gonna have a heart attack any second. And his doctor says, no, they did coronary tests on him and he's fine. So, and you could argue over that particular number, but so what? I mean, even if he was at risk for heart disease. And
yeah, that's
right?
a good point.
It's just irrelevant in that sense.
And then also people who kept posting pictures comparing Trump to athletes who happen to weigh more. So we have a few examples of that. Let's go to graphic 45. Who's that? Okay.
Distracted.
Okay. Anyway, look, we don't know. I don't know. Let's just keep looking at these pictures.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Muscle weighs more than fat. These are not the best ways of determining whether or not he's lying about his weight, and I don't care. So let's move on with our lives.
So okay, but I'm gonna say one last thing. Again, once the conspiracies start, they're like they catch on wildfire. Because you see those pictures, they even got to me. I was like, wait a minute. There's no way that guy's 239 and that guy's 239. And then Johnny Pie got me. He's like, there's no way he's 239. Okay, and then apparently another part of the theory is that he got the cognitive test ahead of time. That they insisted on taking it because it's out there in public, and they had him study for it. Okay, if that's true, that's so wonderfully pathetic. But again,
no, but that didn't happen.
Okay, we don't. No, that's fake
studying
news.
For that test.
That's actually might be literally fake news. Okay, anyway, but so my bottom line on all this is, Trump today was bragging about the 30 out of 30. That doesn't test how intelligent you are. It's not an IQ test. It tests whether you have dementia.
Yeah.
That is the lowest bar ever. We have an idiot president going around, hey, I don't have dementia. Aren't I so smart? Look at me.
I'm a stable genius.
I'm not mentally deficient. Hey! Well, that goes to show that perhaps you're not that bright if your bar is, I don't have dementia and I'm proud.
Exactly. Okay, so we have other news that I want to get to before we run out of time. So, update on a story we did yesterday. I just think it's an important update. Recently, Ashley Banfield, who is one of the hosts on HLN, spoke about a story regarding Aziz Ansari. It was a story that was published in Babe magazine that had the account of a young woman who went on a date with him and felt uncomfortable with his advances during the date. After the woman verbally indicated she did not want to have sex with him, he stopped and the date ended. Now, Ashley Banfield commented on that account because of the fact that it was being lumped in with the Me Too movement. Cases of sexual assault, cases of rape, cases of sexual harassment that ended women's careers, and she wasn't in favor of the way it was covered. So she not only criticized the way it was handled by the woman making the accusations, who, by the way, till this day is anonymous. They used a pseudonym rather than her real name. But she also criticized Katie Way, who was the writer for Babe, who made this story public. Now, apparently Katie Way did not like Ashley Banfield's commentary on this and sent an email to HLN that Ashley Banfield shared with her audience. And I want to toss to the video to show you exactly what that email said.
And I want to share this because I think this gives us an insight into the caliber of the person who held that nuclear weapon that was wielded on Ansari's career. The caliber of this 22-year-old young woman. And I'm only going to read a slight part of her comments to me. And I assume she fashions herself a feminist in this movement. Ashley, someone who I'm certain no one under the age of 45 has ever heard of. I hope the 500 retweets on the single news write-up made that burgundy lipstick, bad highlights, second wave feminist has been really relevant for a little while. That's from Katie Way, who was on CBS this morning.
Okay, so Katie Way also wanted to make public the entirety of her email because she felt like that was taken out of context. I highly recommend you guys read the entirety of her email. Business Insider posted it, and throughout the entire email, yes, she does say the things that were relayed to you right now. But she also talks about how Grace was in a vulnerable position and how dare you attack her? You disgust me. Read the whole thing. I don't think that it makes the case better for Katie Way. I actually think it makes it a little worse for her. But remember, Grace still remains anonymous. We don't know who she is, and she is maybe being attacked by some people on TV or online, but no one knows who she is personally. So
okay, so a number of things here. Number one, Katie Way picked the wrong target because if you're a journalist, do some research. Ashley Banfield is actually one of the best anchors on television. And if you don't know about her, you should. And a lot of people under the age of 45 know about her because of some of the coverage on the internet, including us. She was one of the few brave people on air, and she was a rising star at the time. And MSNBC had paid a lot of money to get her from the other networks. One of the few brave people before the Iraq war, they gave a speech saying that we shouldn't go to war in Iraq. And for that bravery, she was punished by the corporate media. MSNBC not only took her off the air, but they wouldn't let her out of her contract because they didn't want anyone speaking against the war anywhere on TV. At the time, they were owned by GE, which was a defense contractor. That's how they made most of their money. And not only that, just to teach everybody a lesson, they moved Ashley Banfield's office from an actual office to inside a closet. And she suffered through all that, and she came back, and she made it back on air. And when she was on air on CNN, she did some of the toughest interviews during the 2012 elections. So she's actually a great journalist, but you didn't bother researching that. You just judged her for her lipstick and her hair and her age, which I'm pretty sure is not the progressive way of handling things.
So the comments on Ashley Banfield's appearance is the exact reason why I did want to do this follow-up, because I think it would be totally fair to maybe respond to Ashley Banfield based on the merits of her argument. Maybe you want to criticize the open letter that she put out there toward Grace, who was the woman that you wrote about. That is completely fine. But you immediately went to attacking her age, attacking her physical appearance, attacking her lipstick, her highlights. That is a really weird position to take, or a weird attack to make, considering the fact that you pride yourself on being this self-righteous feminist who wants to provide a voice for someone like Grace, who by her own admission didn't make it clear that she didn't want to have a sexual relationship with Ansari at that moment until she finally said no and he completely stopped. Now, I want Ashley Banfield to respond to her as well. I want you to hear it. It's very short. Take a look.
If you truly believe in the Me Too movement, if you truly believe in women's rights, if you truly believe in feminism, the last thing you should do is attack someone in an ad hominem way for her age. I'm 50, and for my highlights, I was brown-haired for a while when I was a war correspondent interviewing Yasser Arafat and in Afghanistan and Iraq, Gaza, and the West Bank. Google those places. That is not the way we have this conversation as women or men. We don't attack, as journalists, let's be frank. Right. We do not attack people for their age or their highlights or their lipstick, because it is the most hypocritical thing a woman who says she supports the women's movement could ever do.
Wow.
Yes.
I appreciate that saltiness to no end. I really do.
Okay, look, as far as the overall story, whether it was Ashley Banfield or our coverage, and let's talk about our coverage for a second. I think that there are legitimate critiques that you can make, and I think that Katie Wade could have gone in that direction.
Absolutely.
Right? So a lot of people have pointed out, hey, look, you should have emphasized for us. You should have emphasized more of the parts where Aziz Ansari kept insisting and persisting and made numerous attempts to hook up, and they did hook up in different ways, and then eventually he said no, right? And so I've seen. Whether you want to call them feminists, progressives, etc., make those claims, and I think those are legitimate claims. We can disagree on a lot of it, but it's fair to point out, okay? There's also the illegitimate criticism, a bunch of the right wing pretending to care about this issue, and they say, oh yeah, you guys only care about it because Aziz Ansari is Muslim.
What?
What?
I gotta be honest, I didn't even know he was Muslim.
Yeah, what does that have anything to do with this? But they see things only in terms of groups.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, Aziz Ansari is Muslim, so therefore I hate him, therefore I believe the story.
Well, you know, I mean, we're very consistent. Like anytime a liberal gets accused, we go ahead and support him, right? Anytime anyone we agree with gets, accused, we go ahead. I mean, come on, whatever. I don't care about that criticism at all. For legitimate critiques, I hear you, right? And the persistence was definitely evident in Grace's account. But here's the thing, she didn't make it clear that she wasn't into it. At times she complied, at times she claimed she mumbled something under her breath. It's just not clear communication. And to put it all on Ansari and make it seem as though he's like some crazy predator that we all need to look out for, I just think that it unfortunately could destroy someone's career when you don't clearly state that you're not interested in having a sexual relationship with that person.
And he wasn't the only one in the room. You could have, so I don't want to wade too much back into it, but it makes it seem like Ansari is the only person with cognitive ability there who could actually act.
And you know
right?
what?
And that's crazy. And if you're a feminist, of course you shouldn't believe that. Look, I know we've got legitimate disagreements about the story, but
here's what I'm not okay with though. I am not okay with anyone trying to shut me down because they don't agree with my opinion, okay? I wanna have a dialogue, I wanna have a conversation, and I wanna do so in a civil way where people aren't attacking one another based on stupid things like physical appearance or whatever. If you wanna have a dialogue and a conversation like an adult, I hear you and I wanna hear those critiques. But if you're not interested in that and you wanna shut people down the second they say something that makes you uncomfortable, I'm not interested in you. If you're offended by that, if you're offended by opinions and dialogue, then this is not the program for you.
All right, and last thing, in the rest of the letter, you're right, Anna, she doesn't do herself any favors. I had no opinion on the writer before, right? But after insulting Ashley Banfield's career and appearance, etc., and she says, I will remember this for the rest of my career. I'm 22 and so far, not too shabby.
I just can't, I can't. Okay. Look, I was 22 once and I know what it's like to be 22 and think that you are on top of the world and you know everything, and then life rains down on you and it humbles you. It's like, it's a common thing.
But it was Trumpian the way she capitalized, she disgusts me, the way that she puts the exclamation point on not too shabby. But Katie, so Ashley Banfield took courageous stands against a war that killed millions of people, and you wrote this piece that you're now so proud of, and you think that makes your career better than hers at the age of 22 because of this piece. But then it makes me think that might be part of the reason you wrote the piece. Because, hey, look at my great career. You didn't do yourself any favors with this letter.
Let's take a break. When we come back, more news for you, including some of these diplomatic talks between North Korea and South Korea.
Back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Christopher Corrali writes in, they never said what Trump's blood to gravy level was. It's a fair point. Miss Us Data says, that email is petty, immature, and shallow. And Super Last Thing says, that attack was very, and I assume they wrote this before I said it on air, that attack was very Trump-like. I don't think that's a feminist way of talking. I mean, if you saw it, like I told you a little bit later after that tweet came in, it capitalizes things in the same way Trump does exclamation points, it's full of itself, and it attacks other people based on appearance. I mean, it was just like textbook. Anyways, guys, if you want to get the full show, 2-hour show, also Old School tonight, Aggressive Progressive, the post game we're going to do tonight. Always remember you can do that at tytnetwork.com/join. All right, what's next, Anna?
Remember when Trump and his administration claimed that they want smaller government, less government employees? Well, turns out that they want to create a new division in Health and Human Services that will specifically and solely focus on protecting healthcare professionals who wish to discriminate against individuals that have certain lifestyles that they don't like. Now, they are claiming that this is a religious liberty type thing. They want to make sure that if a doctor or a healthcare provider has a moral dilemma and doesn't want to treat certain people like transgender people or LGBT people, they should be protected. Let me give you the details. According to Politico, Trump is poised to overhaul the Health and Human Services Civil Rights Office as part of a broader plan to protect health workers who don't want to perform abortions, treat transgender patients seeking to transition, or provide other services for which they have religious or moral objections. Now, the Civil Rights Office would be empowered to further shield these workers and punish organizations that don't allow them to express their religious and moral objections. Now, I want to be clear about something. If it's not like if you're trying to be a heart surgeon, you're going to be confronted with the dilemma of providing abortions. That just doesn't happen, right? That's essentially what you sign up for if you end up doing abortions. So that's strange. But to me, the heart of this issue really has to do with the LGBT community, because there are certain services that they need to get, and oftentimes they will get rejected based on religious objections. So for instance, if you have a lesbian couple that wishes to conceive and they need fertility treatments or they need to do artificial insemination, if they go to a certain doctor and that doctor tells them, no, you guys are gay, I'm not interested in helping you, there's a discriminatory issue there. So the real question is, what is our government comfortable with? What are the American people comfortable with? Discriminating against certain groups of people, or maybe creating a system where people who sign up for a certain job are asked to do their jobs. Okay.
So I want to start with that. Do your job. So I remember the story we often go back to. There was a Muslim guy in, I think it was in Minnesota, where he said, well, yeah, I'm the checkout guy at a grocery store, but I don't want to touch ham or bacon. So he wanted other people to come in and scan the ham and the bacon. No, then don't take that job. You either do your job or you don't do your job. So if you're not going to scan items at a grocery store, go get another job, okay? So I have religious objections to it. Yeah, but I don't, that's why I bought the bacon, right? And so if you don't wanna be a doctor that has to treat everyone equally, and you say, well, I have moral objections to you. You're a lesbian, so I don't like you. And so I wanna judge you. So when you come into the emergency room, I don't wanna treat you. No, do your job or get the hell out, go get another job, okay? And it's actually nearly that bad. First of all, it allows for that completely. Any religious or moral objection on any issue. So, okay, oh, you have HPV. Oh, but I noticed you don't have a ring. You're not married. I'm going to judge you. I'm going to judge you.
I have a moral objection to your sex life that therefore I am protected by the government in basically denying you the health care that you need. That, look, it creates a dangerous precedent, if you ask me, right? And so you could have the issue of pharmacists denying people birth control pills or Plan B, whatever it is, right? Based on their moral objections. And the fact of the matter is, if you sign up to be a healthcare professional, I feel like you have an ethical duty to provide that healthcare to any and all patients, regardless of what their political practices are, what their religious beliefs are, what their lifestyle choices are. At the end of the day, they're still people, right? And so I find it strange that in any other line of work, you're expected to do your job, but under this scenario, based on what the government is telling us right now, if you're religious and you're a healthcare provider, if you're a doctor, a healthcare professional, you can go ahead and deny care to people just based on the fact that you don't like their lifestyle.
So let's also recognize a couple other things this is. This is a religious test. So, I mean, what am I gonna get, a pop quiz from my doctor before he treats me? Or if I'm in an emergency room or an ambulance, they're like, well, what are you? I'm agnostic. Oof, then you deny that Lord Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior or whatever the hell they believe, right? Yeah, I do deny it. No, that's it, get out of the ambulance. Are you insane? No, you get the fuck out of the ambulance. You're in the wrong fucking job. Let someone who wants to do that job. By the way, this is not theoretical. One of the cases is an ambulance driver did not want to drive a woman to get an abortion. I don't know what kind of situation she was in it because she needed an ambulance. I don't know if she was bleeding. I don't know what was going on. But you don't want to drive an ambulance, someone to the hospital who needs an ambulance. Because no, first I'm going to do a pop quiz on your religion, which by the way is unconstitutional. Then if I don't like your morality, I don't like your morals, then I'm going to leave you on the side of the road to bleed to death. So no. You guys just own it, man, say it. Conservatives, you love big government and you love Sharia law.
I mean, they're creating a separate division within HHS that would deal with this very issue, right? And this is something that really upset right-wing Americans during Obama's administration, because when Obama came into office, he essentially undid some of the protections that the Bush administration had in place for these religious healthcare providers. Because the Obama administration realized, okay, look, we have healthcare providers throughout the country who are denying people access to certain types of medications that they need, birth control that they need. And so they wanted to ensure that that wouldn't happen anymore, that medical professionals do the jobs that they signed up for. And of course, now we have Roger Severino, who is the head of HHS, and he's been very open and transparent about the fact that, yes, he is a right-winger, and he wants to make sure that he protects people's religious beliefs before anything else.
You know what, I'm tired of unilateral disarmament. So the Republicans are constantly judging our morality. Okay, I'm gonna judge your morality. I think that if you're a sick and depraved person who's gonna do a religious test before you treat someone who needs health care, I think you are deeply immoral. If you're gonna go, hey, I'm doing Sharia law here, and so I'm gonna apply my religion onto you. You know what that reminds me of? Muslims who say you're not allowed to draw the Prophet Muhammad. No, you're not allowed to draw the Prophet Muhammad. I can draw anything I like, okay? Oh, you're not allowed to do an abortion. You're not allowed to be gay. You're not allowed to do this or that. And hence, I'm not gonna give you perhaps life-saving treatment. No, you're deeply immoral. Judging who we are and how we live and who we love because of some ancient text that you're an idiot enough to believe and go, oh yeah, Yahweh told me that I'm supposed to hate gay people and shrimp, but I really like shrimp, okay? And I'm not supposed to get divorced, but I got divorced 3 times. I'm not supposed to have premarital sex, but I had premarital sex really, really young and often. But I judge you for being gay or for doing whatever you're doing. No. I judge you. You are immoral. You are immoral for going around and telling people that they're not good enough based on who they are, and then denying them medical treatment. You're the most immoral people in the country.
Let's move on to some international news. North and South Korea have engaged in diplomatic talks following some threats of potential nuclear war due to Trump and his provocative tweets. Now, the Olympics are set to take place in South Korea. And interestingly enough, North Korea will have a role in the Olympics. And I'll give you the details on what they've agreed to so far. The two Koreas will actually compete in a unified team in the Olympics for the first time, though they have joined forces at other international sports before. Now, they haven't really decided which sport they will join in on, as one unified team. There's some speculation that it could be the hockey team. And South Korea's hockey team is not amused by that. And I'll tell you what they think in just a minute. North Korea will also send a delegation of more than 400, including 230 cheerleaders, 140 artists, and 30 Taekwondo fighters for a demonstration. Now, here's what South Korean athletes have to say about all of this. Our players are really nervous. We can only take 23 players to the Olympics. This is someone who represents the South Korea women's hockey team. And they thought the North Koreans are going to come in and take our spots. So there's a little bit of pushback, but understand that a lot of this really has to do with easing tensions among both countries and also trying to possibly enter negotiations regarding nuclear disarmament. I don't know how likely that is to happen, but there is historical precedent when it comes to this very issue involving South Korea and the United States. Back in 1987, about a year before the Olympics were set to take place in Seoul, there was a pretty terrible act of violence on the part of North Koreans. 2 North Korean agents bombed a flight that mostly had South Korean workers on it. And you would think after that, relations are done. No one's interested in having any diplomatic talks. But Ronald Reagan, surprisingly, approached North Korea and said, look, I know you guys wanna, open up negotiations, have some diplomatic talks. You wanna maybe possibly have some role in the Olympics in Seoul. Why don't we have those discussions as long as you promise that you will not carry out an act of terror during the 1988 Olympics? So in the past, their acts of violence have been met with diplomatic talks. And so the only bargaining chip that they've always really had was bad behavior.
Well, Reagan encouraged a lot of terrorists. He negotiated with terrorists all the time, even he sold them weapons. Go look it up. Okay, but putting that aside, I generally really like this. I get the concern of those very specific people, the female ice hockey team. Yeah, the North Koreans might take some of their spots if they were going to be on a 23-person team and they could only have 23 people and half of them are now North Koreans. Well, there goes 11 or 12 people off that team, potentially, maybe, right? So the second thing that's a concern is apparently they were a pretty good team. North Koreans are not nearly as good in ice hockey, so there goes their chance of medaling, probably, but you never know. I've seen miracles on ice before. But come on, the issue of peace is so much larger than one hockey team. So I love the idea of bringing them together. And I know it's a small step. And the right wingers always scream, appeasement, right? No, you don't have to appease North Korea. You don't have to ease the sanctions. You don't have to say, hey, you know what, guys? Everybody take a load off. Don't worry about North Korea and their bombs. No, you could be as vigilant as you were the day before. But to me, the most important part is they're gonna appear under one flag. That's a big step, and these steps matter. The closer you get to peace, the better off you are. The further away you are from peace, well, the worse off the whole world is. So I welcome this completely.
Yeah, look, I ultimately agree with you, but I definitely understand the other perspective, right? Which is, they have been carrying out missile tests and nuclear tests and all of that stuff that's been incredibly provocative and all that stuff, and to be met with kindness, it goes against what human instincts are. But I think that when it comes to international relations, you have to overcome whatever human instincts you have, because human instincts will lead to terrible outcomes. You have to tuck tail and do what's right in the name of peace. But at the same time, I don't know how this all ends. Okay, so the Olympics happen, and then what? They're not willing to stop their missile tests. They're not willing to stop with their provocative language about destroying the United States, destroying potentially South Korea, although those conversations have subsided a little bit. There needs to be a long-term solution. I'm not sure what that solution is.
So let me say the last two things about that. One is, yeah, you don't get to make peace with your allies. You're already at peace with them. You make peace with your enemies. That's why it's really, really hard. So when Jimmy Carter did one of the greatest things a US president has ever done, he brought peace to the Middle East between Egypt and Israel. Egypt was the top enemy of Israel at the time and the strongest one. And what did he do? He put their two leaders at Camp David together. And they didn't want to be there. They tried to take helicopter rides out of there over and over again. And it was really difficult. And Begin and Sadat didn't like each other. Their countries didn't like each other. That's why they were at war. And they didn't want to do the deal. And in the deal, they gave up things they didn't want to give up. And it was super hard. But the first step was an important step, maybe the most important step. He brought them to Camp David. They began to talk. And that's how things go. So here we are taking a first step. And the second point I want to make is, what's the alternative? We say, no, we're not going to let you into the Olympics with South Korea. We're not going to let you onto the ice hockey team. Well, you made the situation even more hostile,
I know.
Driving them to even more provocative talk and more missile tests.
That's what I mean when I say that their bad behavior happens to be like the one bargaining chip that they have, and it sucks that it's working out that way. But again, ultimately, I agree with you. I mean, this is the best way to handle it, especially considering the fact that you don't want any type of threat during the Winter Olympics. And if North Korea is playing a role, there isn't going to be a threat.
And look, I'm less concerned about that as I am, although I'm very concerned about it, as overall peace in the region. And so, look, I don't want anyone to think that anyone should be naive about the North Koreans. Like, oh, Kim Jong-un says he'll play hockey with you, then I'm sure they're fine. No, they still have concentration camps in North Korea. They're still treating their population in the most grotesque ways possible, let alone threatening South Korea, Japan. And Japan is very skeptical and very rightfully so. Right. Remain skeptical, okay, but at the same time, take that first step towards peace. Okay, we're out of time, guys. I got Rebel Headquarters. Daniel Biss, great progressive running for governor in Illinois that everybody's talking about, is gonna be on the show next at Rebel Headquarters, and then Anna and I will do a post game and then Old School. So great time to be a member. tytnetwork.com/join. All right, bye-bye. Rebel headquarters. We got a couple of great guests for you guys and an important announcement. So let me do the announcement first. So in New York, they're doing something great. They're going to get people together to fight for voter rights. This is exactly the kind of progressive issue we want to feature on Rebel headquarters. Thank you for letting us know about it. And by the way, you can also let us know about things that are going on in your neck of the woods that are progressive at Rebel HQ at tytnetwork.com. So in this case, it's called Let New York Vote Albany Action Day. It's January 23rd, and it's at the Capitol in Albany. The website's called letnewyorkvote.org. That's very easy, letnewyorkvote.org. And wherever you're watching this, we'll have the link down below in the description box or in the comment section. So as you can see there, they're going to rally. They're rallying average citizens like you and me, and they want voting reforms that makes it fair for everyone, including early voting. New York is actually notorious for voter suppression, and it's a rare case where, unfortunately, the Democratic Party establishment does voter suppression even worse than the Republicans do, and it's way past time for New York to fix that, and I think that is part of what they're addressing here. So if you're interested in that, show up, make a difference, and go to letnewyorkvote.org. Okay, now let's bring in our guest. Running for governor in Illinois is Daniel Biss, and he is a state senator there, and he's running up against a billionaire, or perhaps if you count the Republican, a couple of billionaires. Daniel, I don't know if you know this, but progressives all across the country are buzzing about you. So welcome to Rebel headquarters.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and I saw one of your speeches, and I was like, I see why they're buzzing. Okay, but look. First of all, my one concern with you though is I'm not sure you've got the proper education. I mean, undergrad degree from Harvard, PhD from MIT in math, and assistant professor of math at University of Chicago. I mean, why did you decide not to go to any good schools?
Listen, I was lucky. I was fortunate, and I had this dream. I was going to be a math professor, and it was working out for me. But I got there, and 6 months later, we went off to war in Iraq because we had a president lying to us. And I just thought I wasn't going to hang out in the math department and solve math problems that I thought were really interesting while the country was spinning out of control and not do anything. So I started knocking on doors and fell in love with organizing. And one day found myself, after having organized thousands of people in campaigns and issue efforts, running for state legislature. And I've been there since 2011. So you're running against Bruce Rauner eventually. He's the Republican governor of Illinois. It drives me crazy when states like Illinois have Republican governors. So bless your heart on that. But now a lot of people are. There's, I think, about 5 Democrats in the race that people are talking about. So why you as opposed to the other Democrats? So listen, Bruce Rauner, our Republican governor, it shouldn't just drive you crazy that we have a Republican governor, though that's terrible. We've got like a uniquely awful Republican governor. He was Trump before Trump was Trump. He was a venture capital billionaire, no experience, just wanted to bust unions, put in insane amounts of money to basically buy the governor's office in 2014. And then the whole country went and elected Trump following in this path. The state of Illinois has been a total train wreck since then. And now the Democratic Party gets to decide, are we going to do something sane about it, or are we going to do something crazy about it? And a lot of the Democrats in Illinois, unfortunately, have concluded that the only way to get elected anymore is by being a billionaire. And so I'm running against 2 guys in the Democratic Party. One is literally a multi-billionaire, J.B. Pritzker, the heir of the Hyatt fortune. He's already put $42 million into this campaign. And one is Chris Kennedy, son of Bobby Kennedy, a multi-millionaire. He's already put in over $1 million in his own campaign. And I think the question we got to ask is, do Democrats want to do that too? Or do we want to elect a progressive? Do we want to elect a middle-class person who actually understands what the choices that government imposes on people mean? Do we want to follow the footsteps of the Republicans and at the very, very best not do some of the awful stuff they're doing? Or do we want to actually push for progressive governance? And that question is 100% on the ballot in the Democratic primary here in Illinois in March of 2018. We could just sort of pick our own billionaire who's like a lot nicer than the Republican billionaire and then not change much. Or we could actually elect a real progressive and fight for universal health care and fight for free college tuition and fight to tax the financial sector fairly.
Yeah.
But there's only one candidate in the race who's going to do that.
So Daniel, I hear, and I hope this isn't too much of a gotcha question, but you say J.B. Pritzker put $42 million of his own money into the race, but I have it on good authority that you also put $25 of your own money into the race.
Busted. And it's actually worse than it sounds because my wife also put in $50. So we've contributed a total of $75 of our own. And, so I guess it's all part of the same game. But seriously, we have been able to raise serious money, millions of dollars, by having literally thousands and thousands of people from hundreds of towns across Illinois contribute. And when I got in this race, people were like, dude, you seem like a nice guy, but this is not gonna work. You're running against a billionaire, you're running against a Kennedy. It's just hopeless. And thousands of people have come to this campaign because of what actually having a progressive government in Illinois would mean for people. We've got 9 weeks left, and it's a chance to actually strike a blow for, yes, progressive governance, but also getting some of the disgusting money out of politics.
So let's talk about that for a second. I'm going to come back to what it would mean to have a progressive governor in Illinois in a second. But I know Larry Lessig supports your candidacy, and he's the godfather of the getting money out of politics movement. So that's terrific. And putting the kidding aside about putting $25 in to your campaign, which you did, right? But you only make $70K a year, and I get it. So how in the world did you raise the $3.1 million? And I don't know what your policy on PACs are. Do you take corporate PAC money, or is it all small donors? How does that work?
I don't have any corporate PAC money at all. It's almost entirely individuals and incredible number of small donors. I think our average grassroots contribution in the last quarter was $31. It was many thousands of contributions. And I do it partially by working hard, but mostly by having this incredible network of people around the state who are asking their friends to chip in and help out and spreading out that network one layer at a time. And there used to be a time when raising $3.1 million for a campaign was like, okay, you're done. That's an insane amount of money we should stop raising. But now we're in this new world where somebody who's worth $3.7 billion puts in $42 million of his own, and it's completely changed the conversation. And I think we've got to use this race as a tool to change the conversation back.
Is there any polling in the race yet?
There hasn't been polling for a really long time. We actually just went up on TV a week ago yesterday because of all the money that we've been able to raise from grassroots donors. And we think that's going to change the narrative significantly. But basically what we see is a three-way race where you've got a billionaire, a multi-millionaire, neither one of whom has been in government before, neither one of whom has fought for progressive issues before, and someone who lives a middle-class life, has a record of fighting for progressive causes, and has actually laid out a progressive vision for Illinois and shown what it would do for ordinary people if we could get it done.
So yeah, for me, it's not personal. I don't know anything about Chris Kennedy or J.B. Pritzker. They're Democrats, they're probably generally good folks. But you want to get money out of politics, and you're talking and walking the walk. So I appreciate that. I care about the policies. So that's point one. Then tell us what the other points are as to what would be the difference in your strong progressive stance versus theirs.
Well, there's some really fundamental things. I'm for universal health care, single payer. They're not. I'm for taxing financial transactions because, to get into the weeds a little bit, Illinois got Chicago. It's one of the biggest financial centers in the country, right? The Chicago Board of Trade and the Mercantile Exchange. When we think about how over the course of the last few decades, the wealth is concentrated into a few hands and the financial sector has ballooned and the rest of us have been left behind, a lot of that's happening in Chicago. And if we in Illinois were to actually tax that sector of the economy fairly, number one, massive change in economic justice in our tax code. But number two, then you've got the resources to fund a government we believe in. So now you can afford single payer healthcare and you can afford free college tuition. And so these are things we could actually eventually do. It's going to be a heavy lift. It's going to be a hard political fight, but these are things that the state of Illinois could do and then lead the country in moving towards single payer. But instead, the other guys in this race are sort of making excuses for why it's not possible. No, we shouldn't tax financial transactions. No, we shouldn't close the carried interest loophole. No, we shouldn't fight for single payer. Yeah, I know it's the right thing, but it's too hard, so don't bother. And that's what got us here.
I often hear corporate Democrats saying, oh no, if you do that, the voters won't vote for you. And I always think like, wait, finish the sentence. Because they love the banks so much, No, they're worried about their donors. If you do a financial transaction tax, that affects almost all the donors. So that's what spooks them, and that's why they don't want to propose that. My guess is it's going to play really well with the voters. And I'm talking about not just the primary, but the general election.
Bingo, that's exactly right. Democrats and Republicans and independents all know that the financial sector has gotten a tiny number of people insanely rich, and that's where we should be focusing our energies when it comes to taxes. It's not the voters who don't like it, it's a few donors. And the question is, who are we going to listen to? And we know who the Republicans are going to listen to. So now the question is, are the Democrats going to follow in that path or not?
So, by the way, if you want to help Daniel, and we're clear about our perspective here, we've got links for you guys. And if you're watching this on YouTube, those links will be, of course, in the description box. You can just click on them. Time is always the most important thing. So volunteers, warriors beat mercenaries. You could beat their lobbyists. But if you don't have the time, then obviously small donor money makes a big difference. And then on Facebook, it'll be in the comment section. But if you win, Daniel, you'd be a governor. That's a little different than obviously at the federal level where a lot of these issues are playing out. So at that state level, one thing sticks out to me. There's plenty of others, as you explained, healthcare and others, but criminal justice reform. That's where you could actually have a tremendous impact. So what's your proposals there?
So my running mate, Leticia Wallace, and I have laid out a bold criminal justice reform agenda, and it is from the beginning to the end. And it starts with fundamental sentencing reform, legalizing recreational use of marijuana, ending the racist war on drugs and treating drug use like a public health problem that it is, making sure that mental health and substance abuse treatments are available inside the criminal justice system, making sure that upon re-entry we remove bars to employment, that we get rid of the racist cash bail system that criminalizes poverty. And then when we've done all these things, because of decades of mass incarceration, there's going to be generations of people still incarcerated who shouldn't. And then we have to be really, really aggressive about using the governor's clemency and commutation powers to retroactively solve the problem that's been created by completely broken policies for a long time. This is a big deal. It's about social justice, it's about racial justice, it's about economic justice, and it's about having a state that's budget is not focused on locking people up, but instead on lifting people up.
All right, Daniel Biss running for governor in Illinois, and I'll be watching with interest, and I think a lot of our audience will, because one, if they're rooting for you, of course, then that's relevant. But two, it's just a really interesting race. Can a guy who had no money and come in here against a couple of really, really wealthy people supported by the Democratic establishment and take him down in a primary and then win the general election? So in a sense, the whole country's watching you, Daniel. So
listen, no pressure. I appreciate the time to talk. And I actually agree. I think this is a litmus test question for the soul of the Democratic Party and for the question of money in politics. And so folks are watching, come visit our website, danielbiss.com, follow us on social media. We want your time. We'd certainly accept your grassroots contributions. And we also want you to spread the word to others. I don't have $42 million to buy television commercials, but when people talk to people, that matters the most.
Sharing is caring. All right, Daniel Biss running for governor in Illinois. Thank you again.
Hey, thanks, Jack.
All right. Okay, we've got to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got a unique guest for you guys, a little bit different than what we normally do. He's an actor, and he's, and it's related to Lenny Bruce. So there's a lot of folks out there who understand what a genius Lenny Bruce was. So let's talk about that when we come back. All right, we have a fun, unique guest for you guys at Rebel headquarters. Oftentimes we're featuring candidates, but here we've got Ronnie Marmo. He is an actor, and he's doing a one-man play on Lenny Bruce. It's called "I'm Not a Comedian, I'm Lenny Bruce." It's here in LA. Well, look at that. That is quite provocative, Ronnie.
Yeah, that's kind of sums it up. You probably should still see the show, but that does sum it up quite a bit.
Okay, well, Ronnie, there's a lot of reasons why I'm already a fan of yours, because it says in your bio that you're a Steelers and Yankees fan, which is exactly how
huge. I am so upset. I don't know what those calls were. 4th and 1. You see, 4th and inches. Ben is 6'5". They can't fall over.
Just do this.
Just do this. He's 6'5". Please don't get me going.
Yeah.
But Haley's out now. The offensive coordinator's out as of today. I don't know if you knew that. But
yeah, no, I didn't.
I'm happy to report.
Yeah. But also, how do you give up 45 to Bortles? But at home. But anyway, we should probably leave that topic.
The steel curtain is over.
Yeah. So let's talk about Lenny Bruce. I'm curious why you want to do the one-man play about him and how it relates to progressives, et cetera.
Well, I fell in love with Lenny Bruce over a decade ago. I knew who he was, but I knew what everyone else knew. Like, oh, this foul-mouthed comedian who got in trouble, fought freedom of speech, and lost. And then when I started to research Lenny, I realized this guy was an amazing, incredible man. And bottom line is, he didn't stand in line, and people didn't like that. Well, his fans liked that, but you know, the government and society, they didn't like that he held a mirror up to everybody and kind of was challenging the things everyone else was afraid to talk about.
So let's dive into the details, because that's what I know about him, and already I like him. And by the way, that's a dichotomy that you often see. If the audience likes you, the people in power usually don't like you.
Right. Yeah. Well, he scared them because he had ideas, and he didn't fit into the ideals of what was going on, and you know, that freaks people out. You know, so
yeah. So what were his ideas that freak people out?
Lenny Bruce believed in pushing the envelope. You know, he would talk a lot about religion, and you know, he was Jewish, but he would say, "Why is Christianity any more believable than Buddhism? Why is," he would say, "my Jewish faith any more legitimate than paganism?" So he just wanted to hold a mirror up to everyone, take a look at all the hypocrisies, and people didn't like that. In fact, the very first reason he got in trouble and arrested was in Chicago, because he did a funny bit called Religions Incorporated, and it was about the Pope being Jewish. It was very funny. And some cop was offended. There was no curse words, and they arrested him. Just in in the mid-60s in this country.
So that's really interesting in a couple of different ways. One, we're not kind of used to it. You know, I insult religion daily, including today on the Young Turks. But first of all, that's our bubble, right? Online, people believe in religion a lot less. Younger generations believe it a lot less. But I remember Jesse Ventura was very popular, won an unlikely race in Minnesota as governor. And then he
Jesse
said,
the wrestler as governor.
Yeah, that's right. And then he said one thing against Christianity, and he was ridden out of town. And he lost his whole popularity, and he was gone, okay? So, and back in the 1960s, to do those kind of sets, it was literally revolutionary, right?
Absolutely, and Lenny was in the front lines. I mean, he used to do this bit, he'd say, if anyone in this room, he goes, what was the bit? He'd say, dig this. He'd say, if the bedroom is dirty to you, then you're a true atheist. And then he'd pause. And then he'd say, if anyone in this room believes that God made his body and your body's dirty, well, then the fault lies with the manufacturer. You have a body that God made in his image, and now you want to choose some parts as good and some as bad. He said, no, man, I don't see any reference to that in the Bible, man. You know what I mean? It's either all clean or all dirty. So that was Lenny in every area. So that just gives you a little taste of who this guy was.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know if he'd be comforted to know that he's winning. Well, or you know, back in the day, you know, that's the old saying. You know, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, and some in Lenny's case, a lot of people with him, some at him, and then you win. And then they fight you, and then you win. And right now he's in the middle of winning. Now about a quarter of the country is not religious anymore, and it is speeding up. Just a couple of years ago, it was 14%. Now it's 24%. Wow. And it's absurd. And sometimes it takes comedians like Jon Stewart with George W. Bush.
Well, those guys love Lenny. I mean, you know, Richard Pryor, George Carlin, they came after Lenny. And if you read about these guys, they all, you know, pay it forward to Lenny. And 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 the new comics, Chris Rock, Lisa Lampanelli, they get to do what they do because of Lenny Bruce.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by literally revolutionary. Not politically, of course, but culturally. And he paved the way for all those folks. So outside of religion, what else did he take on?
Well, I mean, Lenny fought freedom of speech all the way to the Supreme Court and lost and was sentenced to 4 months on Rikers Island, but died while he was out on appeal. He died of an overdose at 40 years old. And Phil Spector has a great quote. He says, Lenny died of an overdose to the police. And so, and what they did to him, I couldn't believe it. At the end of his life, they found him dead, naked, and they propped him back on the toilet and took pictures of him just to release him to the world so they could embarrass him. And that's how I start my play. Lights up, dead, naked, and the play doesn't let up, which is crazy. But what else did he take on? Freedom of speech. He lost, and he really believed what they did was they sent this guy, a cop, to watch his act and then write down his act, what he could recall from his act, on a bar napkin. Then he was to perform that act for the judge and the jury. And Lenny was in the room and said, well, why can't I just do it? Because you're missing the whole point. And they introduced him as Lenny Bruce in substance. And so Lenny was like, how come, I'm right here. Let me do my act for you. Yeah. And you'll see there's social value. There's what I was trying to say is important. They wouldn't let him do it. He never got to do it.
Well, that's the thing with dangerous ideas. They're oftentimes dangerous because they're true, and that's what really scares the establishment. There's so many parallels to what's happening today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, when they want to attack you, oftentimes they attack you on sex or something that's embarrassing, drugs. But to me, that scene, that's apparently the opening scene in the play, where they take a picture of him naked, just
dead naked on the toilet. That's the opening scene of my play, and it doesn't let up. You're right. I mean, they squash the truth tellers, right? That's what they do. And it's no different than what we're dealing with today, because this guy running the country is doing the same thing when he says fake news. He's doing the same thing with the idea of freedom of speech. Well, is it really? Do we really? Because the free press, it's not freedom of speech, because you get to say whatever you want, and then someone else gets to squash it.
So. I mean, so that's the thing. I mean, when Trump says let's make America great again, he wants to go back to the days when they would arrest comedians like Lenny Bruce.
Oh, it's amazing. Yes, I mean Lenny Bruce, and this is the funny thing. This guy, when he was a TV reality show host just recently, and then became our president, this guy would love to rub elbows with all the cool cats in Hollywood, right? And suddenly he's exactly what Lenny was trying to fight against. So we have not, in fact, we've probably regressed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, in some ways.
In some ways.
Yeah, and that's Lenny on your shirt.
Yeah, this is Lenny Bruce. I'm wearing the T-shirt tonight because it represents the Lenny Bruce Memorial Foundation, and what that is it's a foundation started by Kitty Bruce, and they help put addicts through rehab with scholarships if you don't have money. And if you go to lennybruce.org, you can buy a T-shirt, $30, 100% goes to the foundation, and on the back it says, "In the halls of justice, the only justice is in the halls." You can't see it, but it's a Lenny Bruce quote. So
that's a great
sorry
quote.
For the plug, but I wanted to get that out there. And
here, I'll do one more. Speaking of tonight, you're on Criminal Minds tonight.
I am. I'm the unsub. If you watch this show, I'm a very different person tonight. Okay. So yeah, I'll be on tonight if you get a chance.
But there's no naked toilet scenes there, right?
Well, there's a little weirdness. I got to be honest. It's a little shocking. Let's just say that I turn into. I believe I'm some sort of animal. I'm not just a human.
Okay.
You're going to see me in a way you never thought would happen.
Okay. So Alex Jones is going to think it's real.
That's great.
So where's the play? Where can people watch?
We're at Theater 68 North Hollywood. It's been running 8 months. Normally a play in Los Angeles runs 6 weeks. This weekend is my 74th performance. No advertising money. It's just really caught. I think it's caught a nerve with a lot of people. People keep showing up. We're sold out every night. Joe Mantegna is, a god to me, an incredible man. But literally 8 months, and we're going to run through March. So we're all the way through March, which is another 3 months, and then we have big plans for Chicago and New York towards the end of the year. And everyone needs to see this right now. And Lenny's voice has to come back to the forefront,
So Joe Mantegna, who you might know from Glengarry Glen Ross and Godfather 3, is the director of the play.
He directed the play. He also helped me in so many other ways, and he's a mentor of mine for the last 15 years. But Joe was the perfect person to kind of steer me and guide me through this performance. And Kitty Bruce gave me the biggest compliment in the world. She said, and this is the review that really matters, she said, it's the only thing that's ever been done of her father that she's proud of. 51 years. She said, it's the only thing I'm associated with and I'm proud of. And that's crazy.
Yeah.
Think about that. I mean, the great Dustin Hoffman movie and all these things.
Right, so that's unfortunate that that's the case, but it's great for you that.
She keeps sending people saying, go see who my dad was.
Oh, wow, and how do people get tickets?
You go to theater68.com, that's with an RE, theater68.com, and yeah, it's really awesome. I'd love you to come check it out. We're having a good time.
All right, Ronnie Marmo, thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you, I appreciate your time, awesome.
All right, see you guys tomorrow.